are talking Apparitions. Now this movie is written and directed by Perry Cummings and Paul Anthony Nelson. Perry Cummings also has a role in the movie as a police officer. But the film stars Cate O'Connor as Lily. Now this is an Australian low-budget slasher-cum-haunted house movie. The focus is on the character of Lily, as she is a young woman who inherits this old familial home. Now we learn that Lily's past is a troubled one. Her parents were massacred at a young age, and tragedy seemed to have followed her all through her life. So she goes off to try and reconnect with her past, going back to this old family house, which is out in the kind of the outback somewhere, rural Australia, and she's soon warned off by the locals who claim it's a haunted house. Anyone that goes there never comes out alive. As well as that, we have her kind of best friend and this police officer who is investigating the original crime, try and figure out what's going on and try and do their own investigation. Now what will happen, you have to watch the movie to find out. So let's discuss what I think works with Apparitions. So this movie tries to have elements of both a slasher film and also some of the trappings of a kind of a more traditional kind of haunted house movie, and tries to kind of blend them both. Ultimately, it kind of falls more in a kind of a slasher kind of style movie in a lot of ways. But nonetheless, I think you can enjoy it if you are interested in kind of both those kind of subgenres to a degree. What do I enjoy most about this film? I think the setup is very strong. It's an intriguing kind of mystery, I suppose. You know, we're given some information early on about the reason why Lily has to kind of go back to this house and her hesitation to kind of do so. I quite enjoyed the bit where she kind of goes to this kind of like this bar, and the locals are kind of overly friendly, and it's, you know, they kind of warn her off, and it all seems, you know, familiar but still kind of quite fun, with some kind of like fun kind of characters there as well. Again, without kind of going into any kind of spoilers here, really, I like some of the elements that are involved here. When let's just say the antagonist or the antagonistic force is revealed, there's some elements here that are very familiar, but I do feel there's some elements here that are somewhat kind of unique to this film as well. Certainly in the motivations, so to speak, of this particular kind of antagonistic force, I thought were quite interesting. Not as explored as I would have liked. I think that they had something a little bit unique there, and I think it was not kind of fully realised, but nonetheless, there's certainly some elements here that I felt a little bit fresh and were kind of interesting. I think the movie is well shot, but a little bit over stylized at times. We'll come on to it. There are some kind of interesting kind of sequences involving this kind of this dark house, which do look quite creepy, and I like sometimes the kind of the directorial flourishes where we see the same kind of room in this kind of like flashback, and then it kind of cuts to modern times to show you how kind of like dark and spooky it is in this kind of the modern era, so to speak. That was quite good. I quite enjoyed the relationship between Lily and her friend, who you know is quite a different kind of type of personality. And the movie has this weird sort of somewhat comedic vibe. It's not comedy. It's not a horror comedy. But there are some situations here that border on comedic. But this is where I'm going to transition to maybe what doesn't work. For me, this movie is shot more like a comedy than a horror film, but without really the comedy in there, is the best way I could describe it. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So we see a shot where we're introduced to the this police officer who is actually one of the directors, and we see like she gets on this kind of, well, she walks away from our main character, and then she kind of goes behind this tree, and then it's like she disappears. It's like she just goes behind this tree, and then it cuts on another shot, and it's like, where's she gone? And then we see a separate shot a minute or so later, and she kind of gets on her bike, and these quick kind of edits of her, like, you know, putting her visor down, flipping the kind of the stand up and revving and all that, and it's shot like a kind of Edgar Wright kind of style sequence, if that makes sense, that he would shoot in his kind of these kind of comedy films or something like Space, that it just feels like it should have been in a comedy, not a kind of a horror film. And then we get a sequence later on, for example, where Lily goes into this bar and it's full of locals, and they all everything stops what they're doing. They kind of look round. So it has these kind of like elements that you would expect to see in a comedy film, but it isn't a comedy, and therefore it strikes me as weirdly toned at times. And there's just a couple of examples. I mean, there are some elements that I feel are played for laughs. Her best friend tries to break into this policewoman's house to see what's going on, and that clearly is played for laughs. But there are other sequences here that just feel like there's no like comedic payoff, but the way it's shot, it's the way it's framed, or the kind of the tone of the movie feels like it wants to be a comedy, but just isn't. So it has some odd tonal issues. And I feel also that kind of to kind of stay with the kind of the directorial style here, the pacing here of this movie, I got to say, is a little bit all over the place. So I do feel, for example, the first act is quite well paced, but there are elements as the movie goes on where it kind of, you feel like the movie's really dragging its heels at times, and you don't feel like anything has really kind of happened, and then you have a little kind of like cluster of stuff that happens, and it kind of slows down again. So to me, the pacing of this movie isn't consistent, and there are just times where you do feel that movie drags, doesn't have really much to go. I mean, to be honest with you, although there are a couple of fresh elements here, at the end of the day, this movie is somewhat of a standard kind of horror film of a particular genre. I don't want to kind of out and out say things that are happening here, but it's nothing particularly kind of new. It's not particularly kind of scary. It's not particularly gory at any kind of stage in the movie, really. And you sometimes are expecting things to happen because the movie's kind of set up in a certain way that maybe it doesn't kind of pay off as much. And like I've said, I do feel there's a missed opportunity here where it could have done something a little more unique in regards to the motivations of, what we would learn to be is the kind of ultimately the adversary here. But it doesn't really go as much as I would like in that direction. It sounds vague, I know, but I'm trying not to kind of give anything really away here. So overall, to me, it's not a bad film, but it's nothing special. When I have to say, I think they missed the mark a couple of times here, and there's some odd directorial choices to me that didn't quite sit right to me. So it kind of knocks it just to a but slightly below average mark for me. So I'll give it a 4 out of 10. But I think it's still watchable if you kind of like a slasher film, but it doesn't really offer anything new, and any glimmers that it does, it kind of squanders. But still watchable to a certain degree. 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.